Peter?
Hey, George, it's really dark. Hang on, let me see if I can get some more light.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So anyway, let's since we're already live, let's start recording.
Okay, come on, buddy. We're gonna.
Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Stanioli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and his associate, Buddy. And we are live streaming. It's Friday, and as promised, every Friday we are live streaming. You know, we're going to have fun with the fellow Gagglers, and already we have a couple of Gagglers joining us, 3 Gagglers already with us, and it's a very nice international mix. There's Faith Virtue, she's from Memphis. Hello, Faith. And we've got Chiro Luis, he's from Brazil, so nice to have fans in Brazil. And then we have David from Ontario, Canada. Hi, David. So, and of course we have Balázs Hetinyi, who is from, who is in Turkey. He's obviously Hungarian, but he is in Turkey. And then we've got Camilla, she's from British Columbia, Canada. So we have a nice geographic mix to kick off. And of course, our old friend Nigel Baird, he's in London. So it's a good international mixture. So how are you, Peter?
Very, very well. Actually, coming down a little bit of a cold. I did a home test, make sure it wasn't COVID. I'm okay. I'm tested negative. I have a little bit of a cold, a little bit in my chest, but you know, it's the seasonal flu. And
sorry, you did a what kind of test to see whether it was?
I did a home COVID test.
Oh, you have a home COVID test. Okay. How does that work? I mean, you shove something up your nose as well, or? Yep. That's very hard to do. I mean, you know, you really got to. I mean, I had.
Yeah, it's not nice. It's not nice.
It's extraordinarily unpleasant. I mean, it's like going to a dentist without an anesthetic. I mean, it's
well, I would prefer to do it at home than go to a clinic. Okay, that's just the way I am. Okay, right. And if I do my own teeth, I'd do that. But that's pretty extreme. But I'm really, I'm glad how you started out here, because when we think how dystopian the internet has become recently and rapidly, it's so nice to be able to have communication with people on all continents, people of good faith, people with a mission, wanting to learn, wanting to trade and exchange. There's still a little bit of that glimmer of the
internet promise, absolutely. And so we have Harry Smith, who's a friend of ours. He's a good eye from Melbourne. You can always hear it. Good eye from Melbourne. So it's good to have friends in Melbourne. And then we have Johnny Bunt. He's from Galway, Ireland. So that's also very nice. Our colleague Kira. I'm not sure which part of Ireland she's from. So.
I think I know, but I don't want to make a mistake, because then I'll hear on Tuesday and she'll be angry with me.
And so yeah. Now the big news, I suppose, of the day is this extraordinarily abysmal job numbers that come out. So we now have a situation which the Biden administration is having made a complete hash of COVID. I mean, they came in, the vaccines were online, everything, it's already being distributed, and then the economy was recovering. All he had to do was essentially bask in the glory of what his predecessor had done. And as always, if it happens on your watch, you get the credit, even though it was your predecessor who was responsible. But he's now got a right fiasco on his hands. I mean, the media, of course, are trying to spin it, saying, oh, yeah, because of the COVID. But that doesn't explain why there are so many jobs that are going unfilled. I mean, that's really the problem. I mean, if it were COVID and it's an economic downturn, then basically you've got rising unemployment, no jobs. But that's not what you've got at the moment. You've basically got people who are just sitting at home and not looking for work. And so that's a very serious problem for Biden. So he's got economic fiasco. He's got a COVID fiasco. His poll numbers are tanking. And in the meantime, Mitch McConnell is trying to bail him out. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. I mean, you have the Republicans, they've got Biden on the ropes, and now they're trying to save him. So, you know, Republicans will be Republicans.
Yeah, well, we don't. We have just as much bile for them as we do for the left. Okay,
Right.
so I hope there's no misunderstanding about that. I think one of the interesting things is that with these job numbers, a lot of people are saying, do I want to go back to that job that I had before? And a lot of people are making life changes and decisions. And because there is a demand for work, people are being a lot more picky. So I think there's a structural change going on in the economy. And people believe that they have choices. So we'll see where it goes right here. But I mean, I agree. I mean, I can't think of an administration in about 10 months that could make more of a hash of things.
Right.
I mean, essentially what the Biden people should have done is just left things alone.
Right.
And just bask in the sun.
I think so. I mean, I think so. You could easily put together some nice bipartisan budget packages, but he's not really able to, because you've got all these AOCs and Bernie Sanders who just seized this opportunity and said, now we're going to, you know, enact the far-reaching agenda. They didn't have the mandate. They didn't win the election, but they said, hey, this is our opportunity. We're controlling you know, we've got the two houses, we've got the White House, but now we're going to shovel this down. Well, of course, you know, as anyone could have told you, you know, once you start spending in this way, that isn't going to do anything for the economy other than, you know, basic inflation. So, you know, yes, he could easily have basked in the glory, you know, done some very modest bipartisan package, and then he'll do the whole, you know, hey, I said I'm going to bring people together. Look, you know, we've got a bipartisan budget. Instead, you know, he's stuck, and the Democrats are all basically, you know, they're at one another's throats because they're not all happy with anything this far-reaching.
Well, and also they can smell the blood in the water. They've only got a few months to make affect their change, and they know it. Okay, right. Because they're going to take a bath next November. I mean, historically, that's always in the cards. It could be catastrophic this time around. So that's why they're in a rush. And plus, you know, if you look at the administration, and you mentioned already the polls, people just simply don't believe the president anymore. No. He's certainly a different president that ran during the campaign. And it seems to me, and this is the problem George and I have, well, one of the many problems George and I have with the left, is that everything is a purity test. You have to be so pure. And what that does is it drives people to extremes. And then there are these boomer senators and congressmen saying, I just don't, no, that's not what government is for. And there's a lot of Democrats that are feeling that way too, even though they're held hostage by Mama Bear, Pelosi all of the time. So, I mean, there's so many things happening at the same time. In my opinion, you're right. A bipartisan bill about ports and bridges and airports. I'm more than willing to throw in internet access too, because on Crosstalk we've had guests, you know, from rural Virginia, and they just don't have internet quality there. So, you know, I think a pure infrastructure bill could have gone through, would have been popular with everyone, and everyone could have taken credit for it. But this human infrastructure here, see, you know, I'm an average person. I think I'm more or less smart, but when you say to me human infrastructure, I don't know what you're talking about. More and more of our political discourse is about things I don't know what you're talking about.
That's exactly right. But now, and that kind of is a segue into a question that Herman Montoya, a good friend of ours, who says about the Facebook whistleblower who testified in the Senate Intelligence Committee. She wants more censorship, and I think that it's a segue because I think, and there's the cover story or the lead story on the Hill today is that the Democrats are absolutely petrified of Trump. The Hill is very unfriendly to Trump. He hates Trump, but he says the Democrats are absolutely petrified because they are now convinced Trump will run in 2024, and they're going to have to face him for a third time, and they don't want to do it. They've got a very weak hand. and they're very worried. And I think that's where this Francis Staunton or whatever his name is, it comes in. The one shot of winning is if they can just simply censor the news as much as possible. Just give Trump and his supporters and the people who are advocating MAGA stuff, just try to get them off everything, and that's their one shot at winning. And I think that's why the Democrats were all fawning on this woman, and who's basically saying, yeah, we need more censorship. The problem with Facebook, it doesn't do enough censorship, whereas what we've been come to, hey, Facebook is censors all the time. It's deplatforming, throwing people off all the time. It's been doing it since 2017, and yet no, we've got to do a hell of a lot more. So it's very much the Democrats' agenda, and I think they are very worried about
the so-called, because I say this is quite serious, so-called, because I don't think she is a whistleblower.
No,
I think it's a Trojan horse, and she went from speaking in front of Congress about the documents that she revealed to the one didn't even miss a heartbeat, George, to the January 6th committee.
That's it. Oh, exactly.
Real easy segue. So I'll tell you, everybody, what's going on here. George is right. This is a call for extraordinary, extreme censorship. But there's a caveat here, and it's very, very important. Mark Zuckerberg, he had a bad day. Yeah, in paper, he lost $6 billion. In paper, it's all paper. Okay,
exactly.
It's all paper. And so, so the documents come out. Then there's this outage, which is completely unexplained. So he has a bad day. No, he's having a great day, folks. And I'll tell you why. This whistleblower is basically putting Facebook on the spot to censor more. Well, I mean, if you really twist my arm, we'll do it. But what's the caveat? Mark Zuckerberg is basically saying, fine, institutionalize my monopoly. Yes. That's what he wants.
Yes, exactly.
You can regulate me, fine, go ahead. But
exactly.
Also, that regulation includes mandating, legalizing, legitimizing Facebook as a monopoly where there'll be no competitors. You know why? Because if you solidify us as a monopoly, we'll do your censorship for you. That's the deal. And that's what he wants. He desperately wants that.
That's exactly it. I think that's what he wants. That's why he's not resisting censorship. He said, yeah, great. And because he has the resources, he can hire a vast staff to censor content, and whereas the upstarts, the up and coming rivals, the self-starters, then they don't have the resources. So that's why I think that the whole thing of attacking Section 230 is misguided, because what happens if you attack Section 230, it means you make these platforms liable in lawsuits. Well, all that's going to happen is a whole bunch of people are going to sign up on Parler or whatever and put all kinds of messages, Sieg Heil, Hitler forever, down with the Jews, whatever, and of course, that's it. Boom, let's close it down. This is a Nazi outlet. I mean, that's really is the plan. And so, Facebook will indeed just simply have a monopoly and therefore will carry out the government censorship for it. So Section 230 that's a misguided way of attacking big tech.
Well, and also, Zuckerberg could hire a whole army of people to do it. And it would be expensive, but it's basically a one-off, George. You identify these people, and then you get rid of them, and don't let them back on. So your cost, it's upfront. Yes, it's the cost, but then and plus it sends a signal. Don't even think about coming on this platform.
Right? Okay? Don't come on the platform, but more important, don't start your own platform. Which, I mean, that was the key thing that they did with Parler. They kicked off Trump. They knew exactly what would happen. Then Trump and his followers would just move on to Parler, and Parler was the up and coming thing. I mean, it was just simply getting more and more subscribers by the day. Boom! It was a coordinated attack. They knew exactly what they were doing, and basically they just crushed Parler. There was all of big tech conspired together to crush Parler, and that's what they plan to do with all such up and coming self-starters.
You and I could try to do that, but you know what, George? We don't have the deep pockets to buy the servers. Okay, see, that's what they did to Parler. I mean, Parler, got bigger and bigger and bigger. Then somebody just pulled the plug. Okay,
right. That's it. That's right.
And it was Amazon servers.
Amazon did it, and that's right. And then Amazon, but of course Google stepped in and said, "Oh well, you can't sell your app on our store." And of course, Apple stepped in. You can't sell your app on our store. Boom, boom, boom. They said, okay, well, we'll just be on the laptop. Boom, Amazon comes in. No, you can't be on the laptop either. So that's it. They crushed Parler. That's the plan. That's why they're all for censorship, because if suddenly everyone becomes liable for comments, the easiest way will be to crush any opposition by just, you subscribe and then you start ranting and raving about how Hitler is the greatest man ever. And that's it. That'll get you, destroyed. So yeah, I think it's a very dark thing. This is a conspiracy by the Democrats and big tech to maintain their monopoly and to exercise censorship.
Yep, and it solves their Trump problem.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, the best way of approaching it is, I think, the First Amendment way, which is you don't censor anyone, which is all political speech is uncensored, which is basically you'd say, look, First Amendment applies to you because you have such a monopoly on public debate that you're essentially like you're a governmental agency. Therefore, the First Amendment applies to you. You can't censor speech. And I think that's the most promising, because that's what they are censoring speech, and then they hide behind, oh, we're just a private corporation. We can censor. We have our First Amendment right, which is that we can kick off anyone we want. But no, I mean they've got such a monopoly that it is the government that is controlling speech here.
But do they have any idea what path they're going down? So essentially, what they're doing is you're cutting off and then alienating and actually demonizing tens of millions of people. Do they realize the kind of divisions? Again, I mean, now, if, the whole thing is, they try to create this artificial dichotomy. Your vaccinations status somehow reflects your politics, which is nonsense, but they keep telling you it is.
Right.
The same issue with masks and all that. So what is it now going to be? Is that, you're a Facebook person as opposed to someone that is not allowed on the platform because you're not deemed worthy to be held in public, but that's the direction we're going in.
Right, but notice how we're now expanding the scope of what is unacceptable speech. So you probably saw yesterday Google announced that that's it. We're not going to monetize any more YouTube videos which question climate change. That's obviously the first step. First step that they're going to be kicked off. First you can't monetize, and then you're off. So that's that gone. We already have anyone questioning the efficacy of vaccines. They're gone. And then you have, before that, you had anyone questioning the election. They're gone. Anyone sort of bringing up, Biden. Hunter Biden, they're gone. Then they hadn't quite got there as far as Russiagate goes. But next time there's anything about Russia and you question, whether that Russia hacked the email, the DNC email. Oh, that's it. That's already been established by the intelligence services. You're gone. So you're broadening the scope of what is unacceptable. It's a quite extraordinary phenomenon.
I didn't know so many things were settled.
Exactly, settled truth.
I mean, the thing is, what are they going to do? Come up with this universal app that you must be on? What to tell you what is settled today? What is settled today? Okay, right. Because tomorrow something else might be settled or unsettled, and if it's unsettled, well, it's disappeared and you can't talk about it. Okay, and then it's settled. Okay, I mean, this is absurd. Okay, there are things that are settled. Okay. Mathematics is settled, okay? At least basic math, it's settled. Physics is settled, okay? biology is settled. Okay. Now there's some nuances there, new breakthroughs, and new.
That's very funny when you say biology is settled, because apparently biology isn't settled. I mean,
well,
people come up with nonsense.
I stand my ground. I stand my ground.
Exactly. Apparently men can give birth. Well, who the hell predicted it? But apparently, men can give birth. Apparently. You can determine what sex you are just by saying, well, I'm a woman, and that's everything. You become a woman. Yeah,
it can change from,
that's not settled.
I mean, George and I are late boomers. Okay, so I mean, to put it into context here. So, a second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism is something that George and I have experienced in our lived lives. Okay, and it was always. And you could debate it was good or bad, because that's not part of what I'm trying to say here. But, it's the role of women in society, how we perceive women, how we should treat women, how women see themselves. And now, with all of this going on, women are just disappearing everywhere. You can't use language that has any kind of feminine connotation, female connotation.
Right.
I mean, after all the work, now they're disappearing people. They're just pregnant people. They're no pregnant women. They're pregnant people.
Right. Well, that's right. I mean, and it is a very interesting question how you can demonize the person. So that the author of those Harry Potter books, and now. She was always a liberal icon. I mean, she was a very liberal person. I mean, it wasn't just simply, a moderate. She was very liberal. Now she's become a reviled person. When she says something like, well, I'm a woman, and being a woman is a part of who I am. And so, and Germaine Greer, one of the the high priestesses of feminism, kind of who reinvented feminism in the 60s, Germaine Greer, was also outcast because she just said, anyone who has a penis cannot be a woman. I mean, she just says that, and she was just boom, a kind of a hated person now, and so it's a kind of an extraordinary how you can move the goalposts, and everyone immediately falls into line. I mean, it's the same thing with gay marriage. 2008, Obama runs president in 2008 and says, I'm not in favor of gay marriage. But now, anybody, this is just 10 years later, anybody who says I'm not in favor of gay marriage, you become beyond the pale. I mean, you just there's no room in society for you. So it's amazing how you move. People can change their minds, but how do you then move to say that you cease to be a human being if you hold positions that everyone else held just 5-6 years ago?
But I just said it. I mean, this is where we are, and this is the path we're on. And I don't know how to address it. It's a purity test. Everything is about a purity test, okay? And essentially, it's intimidation. You must agree. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Don't debate it. Just accept it. And this is what's happened. And this is actually a small group of people with influence and power that drive this, okay? And if you're a person with very little power or no power, you tend to submit because you have very little or no power, okay? Mm-hmm. And this is an ideology that is quintessentially punching down. This is a bully ideology.
Right.
This is what it's all about, bullying.
Yeah. No, it really is. And it's bullying, and the consequences are very serious, because if you get kicked off Twitter and you get kicked off Facebook, you're gone. I mean, you just don't have a presence because nobody really knows what you're thinking. I mean, yeah, you can send out an email and so on, but ultimately, many people are just simply not going to know of your existence. I mean, look at our friend Daniel McAdam. I mean, he was kicked off Twitter, very, very moderate, very reasonable person. He was booted off Twitter. I mean, I don't follow Facebook particularly closely, so I don't know what he's doing. But he used to be someone that I knew all the time, what he was saying, what he was up to. Now, I have to really make an effort to find out, what he's writing. So, and there's many people like that. Just suddenly they just cease to exist. You're just vaporized. As in 1984, you're gone.
Yep. and people are allowing this to happen. And it's going back to the whistleblower. I mean, you and I made a separate video about this here. It's about child exploitation. See, that's the cover. Their cover.
Right, that's the cover, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, because who can be for that? Obviously, no one in their right mind is for exploitation of minors. Okay, but I mean, because that's the litmus test. Oh, that's why we must have censorship. And I said we don't need censorship. We don't need political censorship. Oh, you're questioning the form of censorship. No, I'm not. You're putting words in my mouth. You're trying to construct an argument that I'm not participating in. You are participating all alone in your argument.
Yes.
Okay, because you're a bully.
Yes. It is. You are a bully, because then it's like you're so unacceptable. You're kind of beyond the pale of society. Now, there used to be certain things that made you beyond the pale of society. But now, if you just don't follow all the right politically correct thing, look, let's say the issue of climate change. There are many nuances within the debate of climate change, and so there are scientists who don't deny that there's climate change, but they don't accept the hysteria over climate change. They don't say the planet is going to end in 10 years' time, or they question how much human activity has contributed to climate change. So, but what these people who are not scientists just decide, well, I don't like what you're saying, so you're gone. Goodbye. No one's going to hear your views. This is real tyranny, because you really have ideological hacks. I mean, I know it's always awful when we're bringing up the Soviet Union all the time, but it's kind of the worst part of the sort of Stalinism, when you had ideological hacks with no real qualifications, with deeming what is and what is not acceptable science. Well, that's simply unscientific. You're gone.
Well, I mean, you're not accepted in polite society, but polite society is a very narrow world. Their world is very, very narrow, because I would submit, George, that all of the things that are their red lines are not red lines for a lot of people. They're just saying, what are you talking about? Okay. And the thing is, if you want to participate in public debate on Twitter and on Facebook and things like that, yeah, they're going to demonize you. But if you're going to turn tens of millions of people away, then you're going to be in this such a bizarre ecosystem, a bubble where you're only talking to like-minded people. Yes. That's what happened to the Soviet Union again. Okay, because they had a closed information loop, so they really had very little understanding what was going on in society, except for making sure this person is shut up, this person is shipped there, and all that. But I mean, you're not getting the vibe of society, and this is happening in the West. Okay, it's happening on a very large scale, but the mainstream media never wants to report it because it's a threat to them.
That's right. And so you're already getting all of this. I mean, if you look at Twitter today, with what they say Twitter was 10 years ago, it's a much narrower space. I mean, because so many people have now been kicked off, or they don't feel very welcome there. So it's now reflects the ideological predisposition of the people who run Twitter, who monitor Twitter. So they have all this fake, Twitter trending. So like, Twitter trend, Trump is a Russian agent. Twitter trend, like, oh, they used to have Moscow Mitch, trending, it's artificial creations, but they boost it up because the people who are the most active on Twitter, and presumably they, the people who monitor Twitter kind of boost all of these ridiculous Twitter trending things. So yeah,
that's why I stay away from it. I'm on Twitter, but I don't participate in it. I follow a small number of people that I'm actually interested in what they have to say, but I'm not interested in getting involved in the frenzy. I just simply don't have the time and interest. I mean, to get into like a food fight, every few minutes with someone, okay? And then just the personal attacks. I mean, that's essentially what it gets down to. Or it's who can be the most clever. Okay, I find it very uninteresting, not edifying, and it chews up so much of your time and effort to think about important things.
Right. No, I think that's right. But the interesting thing is, of course, that so much of it is driven by particular hatreds for certain figures on the left. I think the right has just been pushed out of Twitter altogether. But let's say Glenn Greenwald, I mean, he generates so much animus. So if you look at Twitter on any day of the week, you know, you'll see much of it is taken up with attacks on Glenn Greenwald or attacks on Michael Tracy. And, you know, ultimately it's just not very interesting because these attacks are not clever, they're not smart, they're not incisive. You know, you keep, I'm really going to do a number now on Glenn Greenwald, and you haven't laid a glove on him. So just, you know, so much of it is just is that in Twitter now.
Well, because of the caliber of his intellect, I mean, no one ever lays a glove on him. George and I are huge fans of Glenn Greenwald, and particularly on his critique of journalism, of foreign policy, and the deep state. But I mean, he's not worried. But you know what those attacks are? Those are people trying to show courage.
Right.
You know, I attacked Glenn Greenwald today. Oh,
that's
wow.
it. Yes. That's
I mean, what did you say? Oh, okay. All right. Keep up the fight. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yes.
It's all fake. It's all fake.
It is all fake. It really is. It's like, oh, Glenn Greenwald is a Russian agent. Evidence? No, it's like, it's as much a Russian agent as Trump is a Russian agent, or Moscow Mitch, you know, like you remember Mitch McConnell was also supposed to be a Russian agent. So, you know, they just throw this out. You know, you just want to insult someone. So you don't know, well, yeah, how shall I insult him? Oh, I'll just say he's a Russian agent. I mean, then you know, let it lie there. Oh, he's a traitor. Yeah,
I'm not even going to repeat here some of the things that have been said about me. Just absolutely obnoxiously disgusting, that had no bearing in reality. But all it was is to punch down at me and try to somehow force me to some kind of break. So I will write something back and then, you know, start this ridiculous Twitter war, which I don't want to participate because I didn't even start it.
Right. Yeah, you don't with that. I mean, I always kind of avoid that as well, because with so much of these Twitter wars, the person you're debating is always insist on having the last word. And so it becomes very tedious because you're thinking, like, look, we've kind of, you know, you've said your thing, I've said mine. That's it. I mean, we're not going to agree. No, you've got to have the last word.
You're a coward. You're a coward.
It just goes on and on and on, like, you know, hour after hour, day after day, simply because he insists on having the last word.
It's much more enjoyable to take my dogs out for a walk.
That's right. I mean, and I think, you know, Herman Montoya points out, you know, he says the attacks on Jimmy Dore are kind of part of that. I mean, attacks on Jimmy Dore, attacks on Glenn Greenwald, attacks on Michael Tracy. I mean, they're the most vehement. You know, they're the ones who it's kind of strange. It's like within the left there is just this amazing kind of hatred and animus. You know, someone who isn't really following the party line. It's quite extraordinary to see.
Well, I mean, you want to take on Jimmy Dore, do it at your own risk, because I mean, he thrives off of it. He's one of these people. I mean, somebody accused him on Twitter is that Jimmy Dore only has one gear, okay, and you know, and that, you know, that's full blast, okay, and right. Yeah. So you want to get full blasted by Jimmy Dore? He can do it, okay? Because I mean, it's one of the very few things on YouTube that I actually, right before we convened here, I watched a short video that he did because he's on the road right now. Very few. Glenn Greenwald, when he puts out something, obviously, though I like to read Glenn Greenwald more than watch.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because he's a very, very thoughtful, nuanced person.
Right.
Michael Tracy as well. That guy he is just hard as a rock. I mean, yes. They really go after him, okay? And
in a very personal way, which again, you know, which is so surprising when you look at whether you think you are grown-ups, you're adults, you're in your 30s, and you're behaving like 14-year-olds. You're making all sorts of personal comments about Tracy. I mean, like, you know, what are you in high school? And you're not embarrassed to show that you're in high school. You know, you're talking about his physical appearance. It's I'm just amazed that people don't lack self-consciousness as not to realize how stupid they look.
how Michael McFowell reacted to someone. Remember, I'm almost paid $1 million a year.
Oh yeah,
I have a good job. I mean,
no, yes.
I felt so embarrassed. I mean, this is a university professor at Stanford.
That's it. Yes,
like
yes.
this.
That's it. Yeah.
Wow. So much for the meritocracy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No,
they hate meritocracy. Oh, they hate it. Oh, they hate it. They really do. No, I'm credentialed. Okay. It doesn't mean you're smart. You're credentialed. Right. Remember Varsity Blues. Okay.
Right. No, that's right. It was actually funny. There was a tweet by Lawrence Tribe. He's credentialed. He's a professor at Harvard. You think, wow, that's really prestigious. He says such idiotic things. Every time he opens his mouth, you think, how does a guy like that get to be Harvard law professor? But anyway, he said something like, Trump is defying a congressional subpoena. Can someone point out to me why he shouldn't be arrested immediately? And I think our friend Robert Barnes kind of tweeted this out because he is asserting executive privilege, as is his constitutional right to do. So that's why he's not being arrested immediately.
Yeah, and then then the adults in the room say the military should arrest Trump. I mean, these are all the law, people that believe in the law and norms and all of that. They don't even know how the structure of power works. Okay. It's extraordinary how dumb people are. I mean, that's one of the reasons, that I'm very careful, because I don't want to make a mistake. Okay. These people, you already said it. There's no embarrassment. There's no shame. And that shows cultural degradation, when you have no longer any shame about your public profile, because the powers that be and the ideology that obsess them will have your back. You can make a complete hash of yourself in public and you're safe, as long as you have the right view.
Yes.
And the right enemy.
That's right. So we have our friend Claire Core.
Hi, Claire.
And she asked the question, I don't know whether, she says, when are you going to discuss the feminization and infantilization of Western man? Well, it's a hard question. I mean, it's one of these things that is it's a legitimate question, and there's a lot to be said about it. But it's all sorts of reasons. There are all sorts of reasons why men, I think, have been infantilized and feminized, and we see certainly the consequences of this. I mean, I think that the poor economic achievements in the West relative to just a few decades ago, their poor educational performance. And I think the culture is the Western culture is very hostile to men, with its nonsense about toxic masculinity. So the kind of virtues that one associated with masculinity, the kind of the man who protects, he's selflessly, he protects others. That's kind of gone, and I think that I think the Western culture is paying a price for that.
Yeah, well, and also it's how the economy is structured too, because again, being a boomer, George and I saw this growing up here, encouraging young women to do things, which is perfectly fine with me. Okay, but there's a tipping point where we would prefer to see young women succeed at the expense of young men. That's when you start getting into trouble here. And then when you have an economy that is so digitalized, which doesn't matter what gender you are, to work in a digitalized economy, and then you still make these preferences, and you continue to make these preferences. I mean, right now in American universities and colleges, the majority of the enrollment of the undergrads are women by far, okay? And that's happening on faculties. Look at the vast majority of scholarships go to young women, okay? I'm not against young women, but you have a lot of young men that are being left behind. And then you have built into it a culture, that somehow all men are toxic somehow, which is just a fiction. All right. As a matter of fact, I mean, you know, I watch young people speak on YouTube and on American television. I mean, the men speak in a very effeminate way.
Very feminine, very, very.
It's something very different than what I was brought up with.
No, exactly. That is
And
very
so,
noticeable.
and then it starts it starts reinforcing itself.
Right.
Where, you know, do we really need men? Yes. There's the question, okay?
That's it, yeah,
because you don't need to if you want to have a child, you don't need a husband.
Right.
You can go to a sperm bank and, you know, and buy it, buy a child essentially,
Right.
okay?
Right. Yeah.
And then,
Right.
you know, with the whole debate around abortion, you can abort having a family if you change your mind, okay? And then, and also you have corporate America that would, you know, they have a greater pool of workers. Okay, women are more agreeable than men, just psychologically. They'll accept to be paid more, less than men. Jordan Peterson talks all about this. Okay, so I'm not making this up here, and this is settled science, people. Okay, because women and men are different. Men are interested in things, women are interested in people, okay? And then what happens to men is they end up being just the tax farmers, because you don't need men to have a family, okay? Because women can have a family by themselves. And if women want to choose to have a family by themselves, that is their decision. I'm not pushing against that. But what I'm saying is that the more it goes in this direction, yeah, I mean, what are men for? I mean, one of the interesting things, and you and I've talked about it before, is that maybe men are just for entertainment purposes, you know, football, baseball, you know, watch them throw a piece of leather around, okay?
Right. No, I think that's a very good point, which means that in that kind of a world, there's only going to be very few men who will be worth anything. As you say, athletes, you know, because they're very strong and obviously, you know, physically appealing to women. And there'll also be the very rich, because they have a lot of money. Again, you know, they're going to be appealing to women. So it's going to be the majority of men are just they're not even going to get a look at. You know, if you're not a great athlete, you're not a great beauty, or you're not fabulously wealthy, then what use are you? So I think that's you know, what's happening now is that, you know, I think many men are just simply being shunted aside. You know, there's no real need for them. And I mean, going back to the issue of an office, you know, I worked in an office. An office is a very feminine place. I mean, it's all, you know, you basically have to socialize. You have to, it's all about socializing. It's all about being good at making small talk, making yourself agreeable. You know, that's like that spoof on Seinfeld, you know, like, you know, every day, you know, several times a day, there's always a reason for having a cake, and everybody has to sit around with a cake. And so, you know, oh, he had a cold. Oh, you know, then they all come around. Oh, here's a cake. And so everybody says, you know, get well soon. We want you to get well. So it's a very, very feminine atmosphere. And if you don't fit in, you're going to be out of a job. And so so it's like there's a lot of factors that are counting against in the education system, in the workplace, that is very, very inimical to, you know, what we understand as masculinity.
And to add to that, again, biology, okay, these things are settled, is that it's very unlikely, and it's very rare that women will marry down socially. Okay, there's the goal to marry upward. Men will marry their maid. Men will marry a woman, an assistant in a shop, because he finds her attractive or funny or whatever.
That's exactly.
Most women will not do that. The time that women do that is after a war, okay, where the male population has been decimated. I saw that myself living in Eastern Europe in the 1980s, where you had women that were, again, I don't know if everyone's going to follow me, but women from Warsaw that were educated, that came from well-to-do families before the war. Their family got decimated. They're educated, but there are no men around, and they have to marry a worker if they want to have a family. And at that point in time, there was a lot of pressure to have families because the population had been decimated. So women had very few choices. But when they do have a choice, they don't marry down. Men will.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Even all of the changes George and I have talked about here, they still marry up. if they get married.
I think that's a very important point, that men really don't care. You know, they think, you know,
No.
woman has money, she doesn't have money. You know, I mean, they're just very much like, you know, it's, you know, is she attractive? But that's not how women look, and that's why somebody I think wrote, I can't remember, so somebody has an article about why, you know, polygamy, you know, might be coming back, because there'll be certain men who will be extremely attractive to women. Again, we talked about athletes, particularly rich athletes, and then of course there'll be rich men, and then, you know, women will want those men, but they're not going to want to settle for, you know, just, you know, ordinary men. So it's like, you know, again, I think that's a, you know, a product of this a kind of a hostility toward you know, masculinity, that we're actually going to move toward a kind of a polygamous system.
Yeah, well, but I mean, isn't it ironic is that if we moved in that direction, that is like hypergenic,
Right.
like genes, okay, genetics, hypergenetics, because
Yeah.
you want that man's genes, okay,
Exactly.
for your own offspring, okay,
Right.
because
Right.
maybe that offspring will be very, very beautiful, attractive, strong, big, you know. Again, it almost gets, the further you go down this rabbit hole, the more it turns into eugenics.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly where it's heading. So it's, you know, I think it's a, you know, it's an interesting issue that Claire raised. So on a different topic, you know, this what do you think of this Nobel Peace Prize award today? This guy, it's an interesting one that they kind of they balanced it out. They didn't just give it to him. So there's a balance, and at the same time, it was interesting they didn't give it to Navalny, because there was a big lobbying effort to give it to Navalny. I think obviously the Nobel Committee decided that would be just a little bit too much to give it to him, and maybe there were also the things in the past for Navalny that people bring up, so they left Navalny alone, but they still felt they had to have someone in Russia. But even then, they decided that they wanted to balance this out.
It's a writer from Nobel Gazeta, and this is a liberal outlet and very critical of the authorities. Fine, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Criticize who you wish. I mean, it doesn't have a very large circulation. It's not top of mind for the population. Maybe some people in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but they're there, and that's fine. I have no problem with it. I have known people from Novaya Gazeta, nice people. We just think differently, and that's okay. That's freedom of speech, okay? If you think the Kremlin is shaking in its boots, they're not, okay?
No, but I think that's, you know, if we are going to talk about the media, free speech, and so on, there's a much more obvious candidate.
Julian Assange.
Exactly. and if you don't want to give it to him, you know, you could also combine it.
And it's worthless, George.
Right.
They've shown themselves to be worthless.
Exactly.
Okay, if you can't see that, then you can't see the nose on front of your face.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wound up here.
No,
okay?
that's right. Exactly.
Really riles me up. Okay.
Right. Exactly. So that's right. But they, you know, it's an extraordinary thing. It's like, you know, well, here's a very obvious Nobel Peace Prize candidate, because he actually published material that pertained to war and peace. I mean, so it's not just, oh well, he's you know, he's opposed to the government. Okay, you know, there's plenty of people like that, who are journalists who are opposed to their government. He published directly material about war and peace. Obviously, a much more deserving candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. But yeah, they obviously they didn't want to touch that. They didn't want to touch Snowden, Manning, all of the people who actually did do something for peace.
What about Glenn Greenwald? He would be a worthy candidate.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's a kind of an extraordinary thing that they do with these you know, these Nobel Peace Prizes. Always very political. And then it turns out that some years later, they become an embarrassment. Like they gave it to 2009 Nobel Peace Prize Barack Obama. He had done nothing whatsoever.
7 wars.
Yeah.
7 wars.
Yeah. But, you know, he got to, you know, but there it is, you know, how many, 18 months later, no, 15 months later before he launched his bombing of Libya. Then you've got the guy in Ethiopia. That was about 2-3 years ago, who was, he's now a reviled person. And you have Nobel laureate 2 years ago.
Myanmar, with that woman.
Myanmar. She's also a reviled person now. So it's an interesting thing to become. And of course, you got in the past, you know, you gave it to Henry Kissinger, also now a reviled person. So it's kind of an embarrassing award. You get it, but who knows how people are going to look on you just in a few years' time.
Yeah, it just shows the moral bankruptcy of our elites, everyone. I'm very adamant about that, okay? I mean, if they could redeem themselves just a smidgen if they were to give it to Julian Assange, okay? Right. It means they're paying attention. But no, there's going to be, you know, George and I are eagerly anticipating, I think it's in December, the Democracy Conference. It's going to be in London or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Julian Assange, there will be no seat at the table for Julian Assange.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to be honest, you never know with these people. I mean, if they'd given it to Joe Biden, you know, I wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, it would have been outrageous, of course, but you would have said, yeah, I mean, he got rid of the reviled Trump. Give the man a Nobel Peace Prize for having
he's not Donald Trump. Well, I'm not Donald Trump either. What about me?
Well, why did they give it? Well, exactly, but that's the only reason they gave it to Barack Obama. I mean, it's like, well, he's not George W. Bush. But there was absolutely nothing. He had done nothing whatsoever.
Okay, you're going to hear it here. You're going to hear it here first. I'm nominating George for the Nobel Peace Prize 2022. Okay.
I'm down for that. Yeah, I put my name down. You know, I want it.
All raise their hands. There we go.
Exactly. There's a lot of money involved, and I'll take it. Yeah. So it's like it is the question. I mean, somebody talks about you know, in 20. This is reckless abandon. Says in 2015, the Oslo Nobel Committee gave special peace awards to Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. Yeah, a strange kind of a choice, you know, like Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. I mean, neither exactly can be said to have contributed greatly to peace. So, but that's
no, it was Lee Docteau.
Well, but he's saying something different, which I don't know. I mean, 2015, they say they gave a special peace award.
Who did?
Well, he says the Nobel Committee in 2015. He said. This is the special. Yeah, here it is. In 2015, the Oslo Nobel Committee gave special peace awards to Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski. I don't know that, but because you're right, Henry Kissinger got the award in 1973 with Lee Docteau, but I've never heard of this special award in 2015. So you know. I mean, I'll look it up later. But I didn't know that.
I don't know. Maybe the Taliban would like to give him an award. You know, because he's the godfather of the Taliban. You know.
I do think so. I mean, it's but it's a kind of a strange award because very rarely do they give them to people who have actually contributed very much to peace. So I mean, it's supposed to be what you've done for peace. I mean, sometimes, you know, you can say, okay, well, you've done something for peace. I mean, it's a little bit worse than the Nobel Prize for Literature. I mean, occasionally they give it to worthy recipients, like the Nobel Prize for Literature, but often they give it to someone that, I've never even heard of this person. And he gets a Nobel Prize. I mean, look, there are writers around today, and you say, how come they didn't get the Nobel Prize for Literature? Look, Kundera has been a major writer for decades. I mean, he's a towering literary figure. He hasn't won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He's now, I think he's in his 80s. So if he doesn't, time is running out for him to get the Nobel Prize.
Winston Churchill got it.
Winston Churchill got it. Yeah, exactly. It's funny. He got it for literature, not for peace. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure.
But it's funny. I mean,
he started more wars than he could ever.
Yeah, I think it may have been. But it's funny because James Joyce, again, towering literary figure, he didn't get the Nobel Prize. Proust, again, another towering literary.
I met a Nobel Prize winner for literature, Czesław Miłosz. I met him. He was at Berkeley.
Yes.
The Captive Mind.
The Captive,
exactly. Everybody get that. The Captive Mind, Czesław Miłosz. Captive Mind. It's so pressy. It's about today.
Yep. So it's I mean, so they give out these awards for this chemistry and physics, and one assumes, it's hard to tell for outsiders, one assumes that these are deserving people, but I don't know, whether they're more deserving than others, whether their research is more deserving than the research of others, but nonetheless, you leave those alone. But the Peace Prize, which is the one everyone's really interested in, and it's the one that is always really the most dubious.
They should retire it. Okay, they should just retire it. That would be the right thing to do. I think, celebrating the STEM areas, I think, is really worthy because there's so many problems that we have to deal with moving forward, and its technology is going to be very key to that. So, George and I, we're not anti-green. Okay, I'm just not an alarmist, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to say what I honestly think. A lot of these people, it's just an alarmist industry, okay, to scare the hell out of people.
Well, that's
right?
it.
Where's Al Gore? Okay, huh? Remember? You and I remember.
Right. No, well, that's it. I mean, that's the problem about this alarmism, because what they're doing is they're alarming very young people, which is people who really don't know very much. And so when they keep repeating, oh, the planet is going to come to an end in the next 10, 12 years, well, no wonder young people are having nightmares, and then they start feeling suicidal. The planet's going to come to an end. No one is there to tell them, well, the planet is a very sturdy thing. It's been around for about 4 billion years. I mean, it's withstood, volcano eruptions, meteor showers. I mean, it's withstood ice ages. Barack Obama. Yeah. I mean, it's a very sturdy thing. It doesn't just come to an end. We go. It was all supposed to come to an end in the year 2000. We're 20 years past that. Life goes on pretty much as it always did. Some winters are a little colder, some winters are a little warmer, some summers are a little warmer, some summers are a little colder. But life generally continues as before. There really is no reason for this alarmism, and something that is causing mental distress among very young people.
Okay, everybody, the polar cap is melting. Okay, I'm not going to deny that. I'm going to use George's number, 4 billion years of history. How many times has it melted? Do we know? No, of course we don't know. Has it before? Most likely. Okay, so I mean, you see, the problem with all of this, and that's why I brought up Gore. I love the environment. I love conservation. I live in a new apartment complex, and I am the one that always complains about landscaping because I want it to be very, very beautiful, and I want people to take care of it here. But we have 4 billion years of the history of our planet. How much weather knowledge do we have? Well, I'll be generous, 200 years? And then there's some writings like in ancient Greece and Rome about a certain situation and all that. So you can kind of piecemeal some things together. And then I know you can dig down in the ground and you can do all kinds of, looking at different layers and all of that. We just don't have a whole lot of data, and people and there have been scandals around this where people like to fiddle with it to get you. A famous statistician said, when you come across an interesting number, ignore it, okay? Because it doesn't, because when you're looking at a vast array of information, one number isn't going to tell you really anything.
That's it. And the thing is that it's a very peculiar kind of environmentalism that we're talking about here, because look, I mean, as I say, we had tens of thousands of years of the Ice Age. the fact that we have civilization now, cities, commerce, education, all this, all happened because the ice started melting. The ice age came to an end. I mean, that was what enabled suddenly people to move around and to build cities, agriculture, all of these wonderful things. So, but the what we have about like we talk about the environment, we like greenery, we like trees, you know, everything. But that's all. Well, they emit carbon dioxide. Well, yeah, that's it. They emit, you know, or rather, so they absorb carbon. We emit carbon dioxide. They absorb carbon dioxide. But that's all good. These are all good things to have greenery because they actually absorb carbon dioxide. If that's what you're worried about, the too much carbon dioxide, then you know, then here's the greenery. And again, melting has enormously beneficial consequences. I mean, yeah, you know, there's more commerce. More shipping. There are all of the natural resources in the Arctic, untapped natural resources that are now suddenly, you know, exploitable. And already many states are involved in trying to figure out how they're going to distribute the mineral resources in the Arctic. So there are all kinds of benefits that come from warming. I mean, the whole hysteria, oh my God, the planet is warming, this terrible thing. But can you think of all of the advantages, all of the, you know, the increased burst of agriculture and commerce that comes about through warming?
But Peter, what about the destruction of all of these species? And I said, so species in the past haven't died out? Again, where's your data point? What are your data points? Right. Well, look what happened to the dinosaurs, okay? Right. You know, my mantra is here right now is that I don't deny we have to prepare for weather changes. If you know, there are more violent weather events now. No, that's historically not true. What is true is that the infrastructure to deal with climate change is being neglected. And the United States is a country that is hit by a lot of hurricanes because of the Gulf Stream and all this stuff here. Right. Prepare for it. Look, you guys, Cuba gets hit by these things all the time. They're still there, okay?
Right. Yeah. No,
and on top of it, I will brook no patience to use this as a cudgel to completely remake society without the permission of people agreeing or not agreeing. You're just intimidating people, you're shaming people, you're bullying people, and the way these elites have run things in our lifetime, George, they have no right to tell me they have the answers, because you know what? Whatever they touch disintegrates like sand through their hand.
That's exactly right. I mean, you can't just simply undertake these drastic overhaul of civilization, the things that people have worked for and achieved over centuries, and just simply toss it all aside on the basis of very questionable science. It's like, you know, the science is not settled. There are all sorts of debates that go on among this climate scientists. So, and just to undertake these drastic social changes, you know, we've already seen what happens. You know, like this year's spike in energy prices. Clearly, people have sort of undertaken, oh, right, great, we're going to have, you know, zero, you know, fossil fuel emissions. And then, whoa, now what are we going to do? We're coming into winter, and no one, people are going to be freezing this winter. Whoops, didn't think of that. You know, you got to sort of, you know, think a little bit ahead, not just think, oh, this is what a great idea. Let's have zero net emissions. So that's what, you know, there is no mandate to just overhaul everything.
Ideology doesn't, you can't expect ideology to change physical reality, okay? And that's what they want. They think their ideology will just instantly, like magic, change physical reality. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. There's a question here on a different topic from Kaiser Khan, and he says, what can Turkey get from Russia if Erdogan loses and the Eurasianist Kemalists come? So I guess the Kemalists return to power. How can Russia and China offer better alternative to NATO for us? You want to tackle that, Peter?
Well, first of all, what does Turkey want to be? I think it wants to be a regional power. I think it also wants to return to something that was akin to the Ottoman Empire, or it's maybe not physically, but its cultural impact and social impact. But what I would think would be much more rational. First of all, I think that Turkey has to definitely leave NATO. Okay, that is a prerequisite here. Okay, because that will be a good faith act in the eyes of Russia. Because a lot of people don't like when I say this, and I think even George will probably disagree with me. But I actually think Turkey and Russia can actually have a good relationship, and I think that they can have a good relationship along with China in Central Asia. People have to point out, and I don't know why Turkey can't play a role in this too, but I was never a fan of Boris Yeltsin, almost on anything, except for he negotiated with his Chinese counterparts and said, hey, Soviet Union is over. We have all of these Central Asian republics here. Instead of competing with each other, why don't we work together? We're not going to be enemies in Central Asia. You have your interest, we have our interest, and we can align them. Okay, we can align them, and everyone can prosper, and we can have a line of defense against Islamic fundamentalism and other stuff, because China doesn't want that for sure. Right. Russia, I've lived here long enough to see it. I was only a few hundred meters away from a metro that was blown up by people like that about 10 years ago. Okay, it's real. And so I think the Turks could say, can we get into the parlay with that? Okay, Belt and Road, and actually what Turkey could do, and what a more successful Ottoman Empire, if it had been able to reform itself, it could have been the Silk Road into Europe. Look at you. See, Turkey's all about geography too. Okay, so give up on the EU, give up on NATO, and focus in on your region. And Erdogan just has to stop putting his fingers in everything. He's going to burn himself every single time. So I think there's a way that Turkey could parlay with what's going on the Eurasian lands mass. Maybe I'm too optimistic.
Yeah, I think it's optimistic. I mean, Putin has, I think, invested a great deal in his relationship with Turkey, and I think I'm not sure that's particularly been popular policy even among Russia's foreign policy elites, because they think you're basically investing in Erdogan, who who doesn't feel any kind of obligation to you. He's just going to push his own agenda. So the way it's working at the moment is that Erdogan, next minute he wants to be the leader of the Turkic peoples of Central Asia. Then he wants to be the dominant kind of player in the Eastern Mediterranean. Wants get his dibs in all the oil and gas under the sea. So then he's trying to get a piece of old Turkey back from Syria. So he's doing all of these things, and it's hard to see how he's advancing Turkey's national interest. Now, he seems to be quite popular at home, and I think maybe Turks kind of like it. They like the idea of, hey, our country's kind of throwing its weight around in the world. People are noticing us. So, it may be that whole Kemalist Turkey, which was a much more modest view, it just doesn't really have support among the Turks.
What Erdogan faces is he creates too many zero-sum scenarios, and he faces the prospect of losing on all fronts at the same time, and that is a very risky stratagem. Okay, and instead of looking at a zero-sum I win you lose approach, which sometimes you get lucky, serendipity kicks in, all kinds of, but what you'll end up doing is like what the Iranians did after the revolution in 1979. They made enemies of everyone, like the Mujahideen / Taliban. What they did when they finally took control of Afghanistan, part one, they made enemies of everyone. Right. Okay, and that's what I'm just saying with Erdogan. How many friends can Erdogan count on? I mean, Azerbaijan? Well, no. I mean, you know, you know, you paid the piper, okay? You got your dance, but I mean, is that a long-term thing? Okay, no. I mean, I don't think so. And Russia is shown extreme strategic patience.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it is hard to see who exactly Erdogan can count on. I mean, yeah, Azerbaijan, but of course, again, you know, Azerbaijan also wants to have good relations with Russia. Cannot go too far in alienating Russia.
And traditionally good relations with Iran also, traditionally.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Kaiser Khan says, we Kemalists have no issue with Syria or Greece or EU, but we fear US, UK supported Kurdish states in Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. You know, that I think may be, but as we've been saying, I mean, Erdogan just seems to be having, he has much greater ambitions than that. Yes, it's true that all Turkish governments before Erdogan had problems with the Kurds, and really, it really annoyed them when anyone started promoting the Kurds at their expense. But Erdogan has gone much beyond anything like that. I mean, he's really the first to wade into the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, basically, trying to steal a piece of territory from Syria, antagonizing France in the Eastern Mediterranean, getting himself involved in
I think we froze up there for a second.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Yeah. So anyway, but I think that's why he, there obviously is the issue of Russia. It's very important for him to at least maintain his good relation with Russia, even though he continues to antagonize Russia. Russia, as it's invested a great deal. It's a big pain in the neck for him. I mean, it's all that they can do. They just have to keep coming along and have these meetings. And as long as Erdogan keeps buying Russian military hardware, Putin is quite happy.
Yeah, but I mean, what's happening is that if Erdogan annoys too many people at the same time, all of the people that he is annoying will have a common front. Okay, so I mean, that's what you really want to avoid. I'm just saying, as any regional power, you have to avoid getting everyone pissed off at you at the same time. Okay,
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's what's happening now, in that he's antagonizing Iran, and with Russia, it's a very sensitive relationship he has with Russia. He can't really count on the friendship of the French, and then with Germany, Germany pays him off in order to prevent him from unleashing these 3-4 million whatever refugees that he's housing. But you can only do that once. You unleash that, you really antagonize the Europeans if he does that. So he's kind of juggling all these balls in the air, but he could find himself very isolated and then in a very perilous position.
And then eventually that will not go down well at home.
No, that's right.
These are good questions. George and I have talked a great deal about Erdogan and Turkish foreign policy. It's actually really quite fascinating, but I also have to say quite dangerous at times.
Very dangerous, yeah. You never want to have everyone against you. To be isolated is the worst situation to be in, as Germany found out twice in the 20th century.
Never a dull moment.
No, that's right. So Herman Montoya asks, why won't Turkey get out of NATO if it wants to have a better relationship with Russia? I don't know why it doesn't. I mean, I think it's
He wants a payoff.
He wants a payoff. I think that's right. Yeah, exactly. I think it just, it enables him to, wield more power. Yeah. He has that much more leverage. He's got 1 foot in NATO, and he's got 1 foot with Russia. He can antagonize the Americans, and he can antagonize the Russians. So he can even, if he were to make a decision, get out of NATO, then suddenly his leverage disappears. So it's a nice deal for him.
Yeah, but it goes back to my original answer, is that I don't see a coherent strategic goal, because
I think so.
And if he could he's in the marketplace, he's in the bazaar right now, and I think that I might leave, I mean, who's gonna, what do I get for that? Okay, right. Because once I leave, I can't go back.
No.
Okay.
No.
I think that's what he does. I think that's what he thinks about.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, there've been moves in the past to kick Turkey out of NATO, or at least there'd be talk about it. But Turkey is just too strategically important. I mean, NATO doesn't want to lose its position on the Black Sea, so therefore he knows that he has that leverage. I mean, so. Again, the Americans may rail at him, be really pissed with him, but on the other hand, he knows, hey, you want access to the Black Sea, you want access through the Dardanelles. Hey, you got to keep in with me. So that's how he maintains his leverage.
To put a bow on the top here, I mean, don't misunderstand George and I here in talking about Turkey's geopolitical ambitions. Because of its geography, because of its history, it's doing exactly what a regional power would do. The added layer is you do have the personality of Mr. Erdogan, okay? But I mean, I'm not surprised that Turkey is on doing some of the things that it's doing. What surprises me is he's doing them all at the same time, and I think that can be dangerous.
That's very dangerous. So we have a super chat from Kevin Dorr, our friend. And he says, sorry if you've talked about it already, and because he's bringing up the Facebook whistleblower. He says the Facebook whistleblower seems like a setup between big media, big tech, deep state, and the DNC for more censorship. That's kind of our position. We did discuss it at length right at the beginning. And I think we agreed with exactly your diagnosis that that's the goal. She's obviously very active in Democratic Party politics. I mean, she's given substantial donations to Democratic politicians, including AOC in 2020. And I think the reason why the Democrats fawned over her is that they want to bring this big tech to heel, because they're coming up to an election. The midterms, but above all, the presidential election, they're going to face Trump again in 2024, and they want to basically stanch the flow of information to the best extent they can. And so that's why they want to make this about misinformation, dangerous conspiracy theories. And then she talked about a friend of hers who lost his life. I haven't heard any explanation. Who was this friend? How did he lose his life? Over conspiracy theories, but they dress it up, as you said, Peter, with all the talk about the children. It's about the children. These terrible things. We need to protect the children. But as we were discussing the other day, children are always very vulnerable. There's also always terrible things out there. I mean, whatever's on Facebook. I mean, we got the sort of the depraved culture of Hollywood. We have the depraved culture that you get on television all the time. So Facebook isn't unique in purveying a depraved culture, but she's done it. She did it this way in order to get these dumb Republicans on board. We got to do something about Facebook.
Well, if you want to look at exploitation, it's on TikTok, folks. Okay, everybody remember Facebook. It's boomers. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, right. that at least at U.S. base, it's boomers. Okay, right. Remembering 1969 graduation. In Texas. Okay, and the good old days. Right. The bands. I listened to Supertramp in 1979. Okay. I mean, if you want to, I mean, that's what I thought. That's one of the things I found her to be very disingenuous about. Okay,
Yes.
because we do know where these things come from. The claim that, you know, they create the algorithm to create more tension and conflict. I'd like to know more about that. Okay, but I mean, just to kind of wrap this up so we don't repeat ourselves, the extra layer that George and I discussed is that this Zuckerberg is begging to be regulated with the caveat that he get his monopoly preserved. That's the deal he desperately wants, because then he'll just say, then I don't have to deal with it. I'll just cut everybody off that I don't like, which is going to be a lot of people, but is it going to hurt his bottom line? Probably not.
No, and I think it's a very important. I think, you know, we are repeating ourselves, but I think it is worth repeating that he wants regulation because regulation will enable him, you know, he's already hired the Atlantic Council, you know, the Steve Hayes, the Bill Kristol acolyte, you know, he's hired all these kind of essentially establishment, neocon, pro-NATO characters to do all of his regulating for him. And, you know, and then he's safe. Regulation of speech will only hurt the new upstarts, the ones who are trying to challenge Facebook's monopoly, because they wouldn't be able to cope with the regulation, because they, you know, they'll say, hey, the moment they become liable for things that people say on their platform, they're going to be wiped out. You know, imagine, you know, all required is one or two messages, you know, fake messages about, you know, about Hitler, or racism, or whatever, and boom, they're gone. You know, that's all it requires for them to do. So yes, these big tech love regulation because then they can maintain their control over information, you know, and they'll be in cahoots with the government, and that's exactly the Democrats' plan. Yeah, we'll regulate you so that we only get our message out on your platform.
And Zuckerberg will be laughing all the way to the bank.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, bro, this is a guy who spent, was it 300 million in the last election for the Democrats? I mean, by putting in these ridiculous drop boxes only in Democratic districts, so as to boost the Democratic vote. So this is a person very much in with the Democratic Party establishment, which again only shows how fraudulent their claims that, oh, we're just private companies, you know, we're just, you know, that's all we do, you know, we're not part of the government. So this is Jonathan, again, a super chat. Thank you, Jonathan. Says Kamran Pasha as a future guest. He's a screenwriter, sort of on the outs with Hollywood, and has experienced the woke elite up close. I have to say, in some ignorance, do you know who Kamran Pasha is?
Well, he was on Tucker, wasn't he? He did this documentary film about the confluence of woke corporate wokeism in academia, and then how it's married to wokist corporatism. Yeah, I think this is the same person we're talking about. He has a new book out, and he has a documentary out.
Okay, so he's
very, very smart guy. Yeah, I'd love to talk to that guy.
Right. No, I think that's a great idea. Not sure how one gets hold of him, but that sounds like a very good idea to have him on. So thank you for that suggestion, Jonathan. Yeah, I think Tucker's had some interesting guests on. You know, I mean, we always thought, hey, that would be somebody really good to have on the guy.
Michael Flynn, Michael
Flynn, exactly. So. Yeah, but unfortunately, you know, yeah, but you can't get Fox Nation. I don't know whether I can get Fox Nation, and I don't even know how much Fox Nation costs. But it seems, whatever it is, it seems excessive if all I want to do is watch Tucker Carlson's interviews, because I would be paying for Tammy Bruce. I would be paying for Lara Logan,
Pete Hegseth,
and then, you know, Lara Logan, whose show apparently, I've never seen it, is called Lara Logan Has No Agenda. The one thing you can say about Lara Logan is she has an agenda. She has an agenda. But somebody's mentioned, you call your show Lara Logan Has No Agenda.
Lara Logan has no coherence.
Exactly.
No coherence to her whatsoever. I'm just aghast. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was an interview. Somebody put it on YouTube. Remarkably, that Tucker's one off. Okay, and I think I have it on my other computer, and I'm going to watch it. But I live in Russia. I can't get Fox Nation here. And George is absolutely right. The only thing I'd like to see is Tucker's documentaries and Tucker Carlson Today. Those
right,
are the
right. I mean, if there's a free way of doing it, I'd be happy to do it. But I don't know. But otherwise, why I'm going to pay some ridiculous amount to Rupert Murdoch. I mean, I'm not going to do anything for Rupert Murdoch.
Maybe I shouldn't do this. And George, I ask you not to talk about it at length, but George and I will be doing thumbs up and thumbs down, and sneak preview, everyone, you heard it here first. One of my thumbs down is Fox News 25 years on. I'm not going to say anything more. Don't say it. Let's tease it. Let's tease it.
All right. Yeah, I think it's yeah. It sounds like I'm looking forward to that. That sounds like a very good thumbs down. I think it's interesting. I mean, I had that Laura Ingraham, who kind of she has some interesting guests on her show, but there's something I find very unacceptable about her. I mean, she goes on about the censorship of big tech and of media and everything, and she's right. But then she always brings it up. Oh, it's all about conservatives. Well, the censorship is one that encompasses an awful lot of people. By no means are they all, do they identify as conservative, or it's reasonable to identify as, and I don't even know what the term means. I mean, someone like Steve Bannon, is he really a conservative? I mean, I'd say he's a nationalist populist. Bill Kristol, I mean, there's a neocon. I mean, is he also a conservative? Mitch McConnell is a corporatist. I mean, he's just got his hand out for corporations. Is he a conservative? I mean, it's like, if you use this ubiquitous term, it just becomes meaningless. And she just goes on and on and on about conservatives. And therefore, I think she's just meaningless what she's saying.
I think it was one of a Gaggler that wrote on our last live stream. Peter is the most left-wing conservative I've ever seen, something like that. And that is a very interesting comment, because what has happened, and again, I don't want to tip my hand too much, but partly it's because of Fox News, because they've taken it upon themselves to define what conservatism is. I fundamentally disagree with their definition. And that's one of the kind of cul-de-sacs that we're stuck in, because George is, Steve Bannon, I mean, I don't know what he is. I think he's a populist nationalist. That's a good description for him here. But we have the media determining what an outlook, ideology. I'm very uncomfortable with that. Okay, because the long story short is that they're conflating it with libertarianism. I'm not a libertarian. Okay, and that's one of the big problems we face here. And if Hannity keeps saying I'm a registered conservative, what does that mean?
I think
he said it twice, and
I know, but I guess because
it doesn't mean there's no conservative party that I'm aware of.
Well, there is in New York. There is a New York conservative party. So I think maybe that's what he means, is a conservative party. I mean, you get people who run for governor or mayor on the conservative party line. I mean, it's not very significant, but there is a conservative party. I mean, but. You can get an endorsement from the Conservative Party. And
it's New York.
Yeah, it's in New York, exactly. Yeah.
All
right. So Claire says, well, she was talking about Rupert Murdoch is actually a minority in the Western media because he's the only conservative outlet. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what does that mean, a conservative outlet? Because again, you've got all these people who appear on Rupert Murdoch, all those George W. Bush characters, like Karl Rove and the spokesperson. She's on the Five. I've forgotten the name. She was his spokesperson. But essentially, you've got an awful lot of Bush alumni who have nice fat jobs on Fox News. Are they conservative? I don't know. I mean, it becomes meaningless when you say conservatives are the guys who gave us the invasion of Iraq. I mean, what the hell's conservative about that? So I just find these terms completely misleading. I mean, keep using them is just misleading and confusing people.
Murdoch is not a conservative. It doesn't matter if he's a conservative or not. He's a damn good businessman. He found a niche that was a lane that was wide open, and he took it. He's a genius in that respect. Okay, does that make him a conservative? I have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I exactly. You know, he saw a niche, but again, I mean, for instance, Fox News, other than Hannity and the primetime lineup, they're not particularly pro-Trump. I mean, in fact, they've been quite hostile. They were hostile to Trump from the beginning. They kind of made peace with Trump during Trump's years, but the moment it looked like he wasn't going to prevail in the November election, they abandoned him very quickly. So,
Neil Cavuto.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah, so that's a good example. And then Neil Cavuto, and then Chris Wallace. I mean, Chris Wallace just absolutely hates Trump. Or Brett Baer and all these characters who have their own shows. They hate Trump. I mean, they absolutely loathe him. I mean, Chris Wallace, I mean, I just think he's a kind of a Washington establishment person. I mean, just whatever the conventional view, whatever the Washington establishment thinks, he thinks. Brett Baer, I assume, is a kind of a establishment Republican. But I just find it strange to call them conservative. And I mean, yesterday she was talking about that comedian Dave Chappelle. I'm not a great fan of Dave Chappelle, but I'm not a huge fan of this type of comedy. But he's a comedian. You talk about a comedian as if he's somehow a political thinker. He says what's on his mind. So he says, oh well, he attacked me, and then he attacked
cinema.
Yeah, he attacks it, but it's the that young black woman who's always on the Candace Owens, exactly, Candace Owens, and he did it. He attacked her in a very scabrous way. I mean, by any stretch of imagination, it was a very misogynist attack. And said, oh, he really only did this because he didn't want the liberals to come after him. No, he doesn't think like that. You have to think. I mean, he's a comedian. He's not a political thinker. What comes into his mind is pretty much he just doesn't like certain people, and he just went after her.
Try to cancel him. Good luck. Okay.
Right. No, I agree exactly.
Good luck. I mean, I actually like Dave Chappelle. I mean, from what I've seen, I'm not a follower or anything, but from time to time I see his stuff. I think it's funny. I think it's good social commentary, a critique. What he says about African Americans, he has a unique voice to talk about his own community. I like that. It's fun. It's critique.
Well, as I say, I don't have any problem with anything he says. It's just my own personal taste. It's just not my kind of humor.
But I don't elevate him to be anything more than a comedian.
No, exactly. That's my point. I think he's a comedian. As I say, it's not my kind of comedy. I mean, it's like, if you ask like, what kind of comedy do you like? I'd rather have some other comedy than listen to Dave Chappelle. But I mean, he's obviously he's a clever guy, and many people find it very, very funny. And I understand all of that. But my objection was that Ingram was trying to kind of push him into a hole that it just doesn't work. He doesn't think like a political journalist or a political writer. He's a comedian. Certain things kind of outrage him, and he speaks about it.
But what Laura did is disingenuous, completely disingenuous, because for a very different reason, is that she attacked her at one point in time. And now he's saying, according to Laura, he's saying something similar that Laura says. So she's being proven right, which I think is kind of.
No, I think that's exactly right.
I don't know. I don't know. And it's interesting. She didn't show what he said about her. So we're just supposed to take her word for it.
Right, that's right. I did hear what he said about Candace Owens, and it was very, very. I mean, as I say, I mean, if he had said this, you know, you had a comedian and he said this about a woman who was on the left, they would come after that. I mean, he was like, what a misogynist and sexist and whatever. But he said this, and Candace Owens, I think, to her credit, said, I'm not offended by it. He's a comedian. I mean, that's the way he talks. And I think that's exactly the right attitude to take. You know, yeah, that's what he does. That's how he gets laughs. I'm not going to take it as a personal insult.
It's one of the things I really lament is that all these people on the left, they've just destroyed humor. There's so little humor out there. It's so little. And as I commented in our thumbs up, thumbs down last week, when you look at Greg Gutfeld, I mean, he's not particularly funny.
No, I don't think it's funny at all. No.
But he does play the role of a court jester. What a comedian should do is that he punches at power. And see, the left, they punch down. And so that's the secret of his success, is that he's constantly targeting people in power. And the lefties the night comedians, they protect power. That's why people don't, I mean, that's why I don't find it funny. Okay? No, I mean, and then the 1,000,001 joke about a Trump supporter, I'm just, you know.
Right, that's right. No, I think that's it. And I think all of those people, all those the late night comedians, all they ever do is just attack Trump. I mean, we're 9 months into the Biden presidency, and it's still all attacking Trump. I mean, I remember, during the Obama years, whenever I occasionally turned on Letterman, said, he's still making jokes about George W. Bush. I thought, it's like 2014. It's a joke about Dick Cheney. I think, all these years we've had Obama, you still can't get beyond Bush and Cheney, because they're not really thinking like comedians. They're thinking like apparatchiks, and that's just unappealing.
Now is that we have all of these sacred cows that the establishment foist upon us. Okay, so they're the Praetorian Guard for Fauci, for example.
Well, exactly. That's right, exactly, and that's why when they have people like Fauci on, and they kind of fawn on them, and that's it. And it's very much these are the people that the important people. You go and fawn on them. And they have some of these Fox News people, like they bring on Bret Baier or Chris Wallace, because they can be relied on to say mean things about Trump and his supporters. So he gets invited on these late night shows. To which they say, hey, we're not anti-conservative. Look, we have Chris Wallace on. Oh, look, we have Bret Baier on. So that's how they do this. But it is all about, as you say, protecting power. And that's really not what comedy is supposed to be. Comedy is supposed to be, you're supposed to make fun of people in power. But I remember, I know you like Jon Stewart. I got very fed up with Jon Stewart. But during the Obama years, he kind of said, well, I can't really go after Obama, other than, hey, Obama is being very generous to the Republicans, so I'm going to make fun of Obama being generous to the Republicans. And then after a while, he said, he didn't want to do that anymore. He went after Fox News. And so for most of the Obama years, Jon Stewart was just going on about Fox News. And it's like, which again, that's a rival network. You're not really going after power.
Yeah, but he was merciless against CNN. Don't forget that, okay? Merciless.
Right. Well, he was. Look, my view was that he was good during the Bush years. But that's really the problem. Is that it's no good. When you attacking only when it's one side. There was a lot to attack Bush, and that was great that he was attacking the Iraq invasion and all the ridiculous justifications. But you got to be principled about it, not just be against it simply because it's a Republican and it's good to be against Republicans.
Yeah, but George, there's one important caveat we haven't mentioned here. Jon Stewart was better than the rest. Okay?
Well, I think that's true. I agree with that.
That's really my point.
Yeah,
okay,
no, I think I agree with that. Yes, definitely. This twerp who succeeded him, Noah something or other. I mean, yeah.
No, but I mean, the Kimmels and all these, I mean, these people are just, they embarrass themselves, in my opinion, every single night, okay? Because they kneel at the altar of this ideology and the patron saints of this ideology. I find it really, really embarrassing and debasing themselves, okay?
Yes.
You know,
I think
going back to Gutfeld, I mean, he just lays it out on people. I mean, I think he's rude, he's crude, he's not particularly smart. His timing isn't particularly great, but compared to the rest of them, that's what I'm getting at. Compared to the rest of them, at least I get a little chuckle once in a while.
Right. No, I agree with that. I think it's he doesn't have the professional skill. Even
he's not a comedian. He's a writer.
Exactly. You know, the one thing you always knew about people like Letterman and Leno is that they were pros. They knew how to deliver a line. I mean, that, you know, they had that down to a T. But he, you know, Gutfeld doesn't have any of that. But you're right. He doesn't have the worship, because these people literally worship the powerful, the important people. They worship, they get down on their knees before Fauci, they get down on their knees before Brennan, or, you know, whoever, you know, used to come on denouncing Trump, or coming with Brennan or Clapper. Oh, thank you for telling us that Trump is a traitor.
Susan Rice, remember? Trump
out of
Syria.
Oh my God. And they, that's it. You're absolutely right. We're going to leave Syria. You know, you're supposed to be a comedian, and you think, oh my God, we're going to leave Syria.
90%, 99.9% of Americans couldn't find it if their life depended on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're going to leave Syria. It's absurd. Conan O'Brien, I liked him. He wasn't political. He was just quirky. I really liked him, okay? But they got rid of him too. And he wasn't political.
Right. Yeah. No. That's right. That's nice. I think that's right. He was marginalized very quickly. So we have something very generous. We have Chaos Lord. There's a super chat, and he says it's for Buddy. This one is for Buddy. He says. So
I gotta comb your hair. There we go.
Buddy is Chaos has been very generous, and it's exclusively for you. It's not for me. It's not for Peter. It's exclusively for you. So that's
okay. We're gonna save this video because Buddy has a lawyer, so we have a verbal agreement here. Okay? Because his lawyer is saying, I'm taking advantage of his intellectual property and his image. Okay, and he turned into a brand. Check out our merch store. Okay, he's a brand. And look at these other dogs here. They're just jealous as all hell.
That's right. Exactly. They you know, it's not the kind of, you know, these intellectual property lawyers.
You don't want to mess with them. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So we have another super chat from Jonathan. And Jonathan points out, you know, Jeff Dunham has been hitting it out of the park, mocking Joe Biden with his Walter puppet. I say, I don't know who Jeff Dunham is. Do you?
But we're going to find out after this.
We are going to find out, absolutely. That it's got, you know, interesting. I mean, I would have thought, you know, Biden would be a, you know, absolute gift for any comedian. I mean, it's like you know, to mimic him. I mean, there's just so much to make fun of. I mean, it's
you know why it doesn't happen?
Always phone it in.
Because they were sold a bill of goods. And I mean, this is a gift on a platter to make fun of Joe Biden.
Yeah.
But what would that mean?
Yes.
They would have to admit that they were wrong.
Yes.
And so they can't. They have too much pride. Okay, they have so much pride that they can't admit that, you know, they had made a mistake, because then they would feel embarrassed. And because they're celebrities and we have to worship them, they're never embarrassed. Okay, they painted themselves into a corner of unbelievable magnitude.
Yes, that's right. So there's Herman Montoya talks about Jay Leno wasn't political either. I love him a lot. He does car shows now. I was under the impression that he did mostly kind of performed in comedy clubs. I mean, he famously said that all the money that he made on television, he saved it all. So the money that he spent was the money that he made appearing at comedy clubs. I mean, I think that was always his thing, that, 5 days a week he would do his TV show, and then on weekends he would be performing in comedy clubs, and that was his spending money. All the rest he saved.
You know what he spent it on? Cars.
Yeah.
He has a vast collection of cars. I've seen videos of it. Amazing. I mean, he wasn't one of my favorites.
No, I didn't think so either. I didn't think so either. But neither was Letterman. I mean, they were both kind of the successors to Carson, but neither of them had Carson's gift.
We were lucky. You and I got lucky.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone has tried to duplicate it, and very few have ever succeeded. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, if we take Johnny Carson as the archetype, look how it's devolved to Gutfeld. Look, that's amazing.
Yes. That's right. So what was it? There was a question that I wanted. So it was reckless abandon says, which president has ever been disparaged with a F Joe Biden? I don't think anyone has ever been that disparaged. I mean, Trump was, very, he enormous hostility toward Trump. I don't remember whether it was as intense with Trump as it was Nixon. Nixon generated an awful lot of hatred. And with Nixon, there was always this endless psychologizing of him. I mean, it was always very easy to psychologize because you could always see there was this resentment and anger within him. And so everyone who hated him would do these endless, psychobabble analyzing Nixon. But Nixon would generate an enormous hostility, even though he was really politically a centrist. I mean, both domestically and internationally. He was essentially a moderate. He certainly did not pursue any ideological agenda of the Goldwater types or of the interventionist types or anti-communist types. So, but on a personal level, I think it was enormous hatred for Nixon.
Yeah, but having said that, coming from a Republican family, Nixon was adored by a good part of the electorate. I mean, you don't have Nixon to kick around anymore. I mean, because they hated the liberal media. They hated satire and all those writers, okay?
Yes.
And Nixon was like a magnet for them. They overlooked all the stuff that, valid to criticize, but, he stood up against the Eastern liberals. Yes. And in my family, I heard that all of the time.
That's a very,
he fights back against these people.
Right.
And I'll tell you, Spiro Agnew was liked too, because he was the guy he was like a boxer. He would go out and block people. I mean, boom, he didn't care. Okay. So, I mean, you get all of these intellectual talking head types that, criticize Nixon. They're all liberals. There's never a conservative or even moderate presentation of him. It's always stilted to one direction, always. Because I actually like Nixon as a president. I think he was actually a pretty good president. Okay.
Yeah. No, all of that is you make excellent points, and I think that it started very early in his career. When he made his famous Checkers television address, because it seemed like his political career was over. And while all of the sort of the liberal media type, the liberal intellectuals mocked his Checkers TV address, the public responded very positively. They liked it when he talked about Pat's cloth coat. This is not a man who has any money. And he didn't. He actually came from a very poor family. I mean, his family was probably about the poorest of any presidential candidate. So when he said, Pat can't afford mink coats, she wears a cloth coat, I think people really responded like, all these rich liberals are attacking, this person who barely can get by.
And the fact that Dwight D. Eisenhower, he came from a modest family as well, and where he cut his teeth, obviously, in the military. So he tapped into that too, that Nixon appealed to the everyday person, guys that fought on Normandy, their families and all that. Again, Eisenhower is also an underestimated president.
Right.
Very much so, because Eisenhower, probably more than anyone in my lifetime, he really was a president of the people. He understood people. I mean, he led men into battle, okay?
Yes.
And I think he was a very, very good president.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it was very interesting that you had that. It was always a tradition of a kind of cautious republicanism, which was embodied by Eisenhower and Nixon. Very different from the recklessness of the Kennedy-Johnson years, and then again, very different from the Republicans who came after Nixon, who kind of also embraced a kind of interventionism. I mean, Eisenhower and Nixon were very cautious. Eisenhower did not escalate the American involvement in Vietnam. I mean, this would be perilous. Kennedy, he just, recklessly just, escalated. There did lots of foolish things in Vietnam, such as the most important, taking part in the overthrow of Diem, when anyone could have predicted the country would just fall apart without Diem. And then Johnson just simply took over the war. I mean, these are decisions that neither Eisenhower nor Nixon would have taken.
And Eisenhower told the British and the French, and importantly the Israelis, to get out of Suez.
Exactly.
No conversation. Get out.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, he got really tough. I think the one president who actually ever got tough with Israel. I mean, it was a remarkable thing. Basically, Israel has to leave, because of occupying Sinai. So you got to go, and that no ands, ifs, and buts. Israel departed, and the British and the French. I mean, he took a very tough line. I mean, a run on the pound. I mean, he provoked an economic crisis. And
it was Anthony Eden that maybe is the first victim of seeing Hitler everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, and he may be the zero patient of seeing Hitler everywhere.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right. Yeah.
And we've had a whole trove of politicians ever since. That's the next Hitler. That's the next Hitler. Because Anthony Eden, he was a very close associate of Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
He went through the entire war with him, and he feared making the same mistake of the 1930s.
Yes.
Okay,
No question.
So someone that thought he understood the passage and meaning of history got it completely wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. It is a fascinating case of complete foolishness. I mean, exactly. He somehow saw in NASA the embodiment of Hitler, Mussolini. Amazing misjudgment, and I think one that his mentor Churchill would not have made. I mean, admittedly, by 56. Churchill wasn't really corpus mentis. I mean, he was already a bit past it. I still doubt that Churchill, I mean, one thing Churchill would have known not to do was to fall out with the Americans. I mean, that, he said, it should have been obvious to Eden as the Suez crisis started bubbling up, that the Americans were not on board. And, Britain at that time was already a junior partner to the United States. You don't antagonize your senior partner. Your senior partner is not with you, and they're not going to tolerate the junior partner taking initiatives by himself.
And Eden, he drew the wrong conclusions because he was close enough to Churchill during the war, and of course there's a storied relationship between FDR and Churchill. And one of the things Churchill understood very, very clearly, and he wrote this in his memoirs and to letters, which he always was writing letters, is that the Americans have a big problem with the British Empire. They're not going to shed blood and treasure for the British Empire. Okay, and it was very tellingly, is that Churchill begged FDR to visit London during the war, and he never would. because he said, we will not justify the war aims of Churchill's government and the British Empire, because he was a very, very anti-imperialist. He said, that's not why we're going to war, and I'm not going to let anyone think differently, okay? Because of course, that Churchill would have wanted that, that allure, of the special relationship, it may be a junior partnerships for us, but we're going to get our way. No.
No, I think that's right. No, I think that's it. But I think where, Churchill would have had more of a judgment than Eden. I mean, I think that Churchill would have known, like, look, as the crisis in 56 is unfolding, he's getting clear messages from Eisenhower and John Foster Dulles that they're not going to tolerate any attempt to overthrow NASA, any attempt to seize the canal. They're just not going to tolerate it. And Eden, he was getting a message and he ignored it. And I think Churchill would have known, just don't antagonize the Americans. Just play for time or whatever, but just don't go so against their will and to go behind their backs. I mean, it's like that again, the Americans didn't like. So a disaster. But it's a very interesting point, because Eden was supposed to be, he was a kind of intellectual of that time. I mean, I got a double first at Oxford. He was an expert on languages, with Persian and Arabic and Greek. I mean, really very, very intelligent person, and a complete failure in public life.
And look what happened to the, the British and French empires after that. They wound down very, very quickly. Washington is not going to be there to bail you out, okay? And it's very interesting too, looking at the with the way Eisenhower saw Dien Bien Phu, the tragic loss of violent loss of influence the French had in Indochina. It's just like, no. Why should we get involved in that?
Right,
okay.
Right.
Again, in the same kind of FDR tradition, is that the Cold War is not going to be a cutout, a way to save Western powers and their empires, their colonies. No way.
No, that's right. It's it was very much. I mean, and Churchill knew this. He knew this during the war, that what the Americans were doing. I mean, knew about the 50 destroyers that the Americans gave them. Basically, the British gave up all of their positions in the Caribbean. I mean, that's it. They just basically gave them up to the Americans for 50 aging destroyers.
Yeah, and those destroyers were going to be turned into razor blades in a nanosecond.
So Churchill knew about this, and they were basically getting all of the gold reserves. I mean, all the gold reserves of the British was being transferred to the United States. I mean, the Americans only introduced Lend-Lease when the British just didn't have any gold reserves left. I mean, that's it. That's all right. Well, we have Lend-Lease. And I think Churchill then coined that expression, I think, after the war. He said something like, Lend-Lease, he said, surely the most unsordid act in history. A very, a two-edged way of putting it, the most unsordid act in history. So, so he knew perfectly well what the game the Americans were playing. But, Eden, there was no excuse for Eden to make such an absolute mess of things. But he continued. I mean, and the strange thing is that he was still alive during the 1967 war, and he kind of rejoiced. He felt that somehow he had been vindicated because NASA had been humiliated. And it's like,
could you imagine 11 years?
Yeah.
But again, it's such a testament to someone that is such pristine pedigree, education, background, and then when you come to face a crisis, all of those things are not necessarily going to help you. Okay?
No. You have that kind of a political intelligence that he completely lacked. And that's,
look at Stalin. Stalin was not a very well educated. He was self-educated. He self-learned.
No, but
a politically adroit person. Whoa.
No, but nothing like the formal education that Eden had. And I mean, Eden was also. I mean, he had a lot of tragedy in his personal life. I mean, his brother was killed in World War I. His son was killed in World War II. So in many ways, a very sympathetic figure. But just lacked the kind of political intelligence that
Well,
is
you could
required.
say
And he
things.
loved,
You could say the same thing about Neville Chamberlain. I mean, pristine pedigree.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
That's right. That's right. But Chamberlain, at least, unlike Eden, I mean, I think he was a much more of a hard-headed political realist. I mean, I think that he kind of misjudged the political mood in Britain, but he was, very different from Eden. I mean, he was a very tough-minded realist. I mean, the appeasement policy was a very tough-minded view, which is, I don't want Hitler. We don't want to get into a war with Hitler. That was his rationale. So, that was very much a very realist foreign policy.
The reason why I mention it is that because of his hard-headedness, one would have thought he would have been able to maneuver better. He made some tactical mistakes, but he was right. Neville Chamberlain has gotten one of the worst raps in modern history. I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. He got a very unfair rap. He was looking after his country's interests. His country's interest, he said, is not to go to war. At least not to go to war for some years.
There are documents that he was presented that Britain would not be prepared to go to war until 1940. Right. Okay, and basically your job is to keep us out.
That's it. Yeah.
Talk about hard-headedness. He did. Okay.
He did. I mean, he was hard-headed, but he misjudged the mood, and then he was kind of forced, I think, into issuing these guarantees, which were just disaster, because you don't just issue open-ended guarantees to go to war for other countries. So he reversed his policies in 1939, and of course, it ended in catastrophe for him. But up until then, he was pursuing a very hard-headed realist policy. It's the reverse that brought disaster upon himself.
And at the same time, again, the historical record is very clear. Britain was rearming all during.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But in the end, I mean, the fiasco of 1939 and 40 was showed that neither Britain nor France were ready for war, and Chamberlain knew that they weren't ready for war. I mean, look, was a France collapse. Britain had to be evacuated. I mean, it's the humiliation of a complete evacuation, which they only pulled off because Hitler held back and didn't bomb the British during the evacuation. But
all you have to know about the French preparedness, parliamentary elections, 1936. It was the Popular Front, and then you had the nationalist parties. And you know what there was? Against the National Front, a picture of Hitler, better Hitler than Blum. Right. France wasn't defeated in 1940. It just collapsed.
It collapsed,
It collapsed.
It was collapsed. But when you think of it, this was really 20 years. 20 years only had elapsed since the horrific World War I. I mean, the French fought very bravely in World War I. I mean, you can't sort of, people make fun of the French, but they fought with great bravery and tenacity in World War I. But that was it. I mean, it just basically completely exhausted the country. They couldn't face doing this all over again. And this is 20 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's 2001. That's about the time when George W. Bush launched his war on Afghanistan. I mean, seems like yesterday. So you can see people say, we can't face Germany again. I mean,
that's such a good point. That is such a good point. That's the kind of time frame there.
Right.
All right, George, can we wrap this up here? You got any more?
I think so. I mean, I think we're coming to an end, and we have let's see, anything else. No, I think any final thoughts, Peter?
Well, I'll see you on Sunday for across the.
All right. Well, I think a final thought.
So much is going on. We appreciate the questions very, very much.
Well, hold on a sec. We do have a super chat from Harry Smith, and he says, "Yes, when did the Berlin Wall go up, and what happened between VE Day when Berlin was taken and his formal division the day the wall went up?" Well, it's a long history, but basically, roughly, I mean, at the wartime conferences, they agreed on a four-power division of Germany, but they also agreed on a four-power division of Berlin. So what then happened is that, of course, Berlin was deep in the Russian sector, and so, you know, the British, French, and American sectors combined, of Germany combined, and they created, became West Germany. But Berlin continued to be divided among the four powers. And why did the Berlin Wall go up? Well, because people kept leaving East Germany. It was very difficult to leave East Germany because they mined the borders, but the one way to leave East Germany was via Berlin. And there came a point at which the East German leadership, you know, Walter Ulbricht, went to Khrushchev and says, we can't, the state is just going to collapse. We're losing all of our bright, you know, people because they're all leaving us for the West. And Khrushchev said, okay, well, you know, there's only one thing we can do, end this escape route through Berlin. And they built the wall. Essentially, they built that wall around the west of the city. So that this west of the city was kind of, you know, walled off from the rest of East Germany.
And what was a magnet too is the introduction of the Deutschmark, a real currency. Okay, and actually that you saw the rebounding of the West German economy. I mean, they called it the German miracle for a reason.
That's
and,
right.
But we'll end on this one because I mentioned Stalin earlier. Is that originally there was going to be a British zone and an American zone and just two. And then I think it was Truman that said, you know, okay, maybe we should let the French have a zone. And Stalin said, hey, you got a zone, and the British have a zone. You want to give it to the French? Go right ahead. I don't care. I mean,
no, I think it was Churchill. You wanted to push because I think he suddenly realized that Britain was really becoming a very minor power compared to the United States and the USSR. So he needed some ballast, from the French. But it is a kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it became a very sore point during the Cold War because it was this kind of Western enclave deep in the side of the Soviet.
I visited it before the wall came down. I went there many times and I was living in Poland.
And people lived there. You know, it became this sort of the kind of a symbolism of people who live there. You know, where Günter Grass, you know, was a famous West German novelist. He's ostentatiously lived in West Berlin, and of course, you know, Jack Kennedy famously went there and said, "Ich bin ein Berliner."
I'm a jelly bean.
Exactly. So we got, and so there's a nice super chat from Al QK, which is, you know, there isn't a question, but it's a very nice, I think a dove I think a dove of peace and a V for victory sign, which is very, very nice of you. Thank you so much. So I think that's about it. So
thank you, everybody. As usual, where are your Friday night? Well, it's night for me. Friday night date.
Right, exactly. This is Friday night. You know, we love being here. We love doing this. You know, we love all the questions and all your comments. Always very stimulating. Thank you all for showing up and staying with us. And we look forward to seeing you same time next Friday. Thank you. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.
Okay, we're still live on YouTube.